Hi, welcome to the Peak Performance Podcast series, where you develop the skills and tools to build a mindset for success. For more videos and content, visit our website at www.bodybrainintegration.com.
Hi guys, Nathan Quinn here from Body Brain Integration, and today I have the absolute pleasure of introducing one of my close friends and colleagues, David Nugent. Now, for those of you who came along to our Mindset and Performance event, you'll remember seeing Dave unpack what we call build-up and the cycle of violence, how we go around in this circle between being happy and being frustrated and then everything going wrong, and how we try to get back on track. Now, personally, I've had the pleasure of going through Dave's heavy metal program. So heavy metal is all around men's education against violence and how that we can create better relationships. So Dave, myself, and a few other people have been working towards trying to change the way we look at what being a man is, and also how we treat each other. Because some of the stats, guys, is really scary. Every 7 hours, people are being hospitalized due to domestic violence. And also I'm sure Dave will enlighten us on a lot more there. So welcome, Dave. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
No problem, mate. So Dave, can you tell the guys a little bit about how you got into this work?
Well, it's actually something that I got into. I didn't plan to get into this work. I was a tradie, and I was just your average family guy, and working away like all of us do. And then before I realised, my behaviour was starting to have a negative impact on the people that loved me most, to the point that I was very good at wearing a mask and hiding behind that mask. But one particular day at a family event, I dropped the mask, and family and friends that are close to us got to see another side of me that I was able to always hide. And that was the breaking point for my partner, who then sort of said to me, "I can't do this anymore, Dave." And that was the beginning of the journey that I started to work on myself. Which then led to a lot of counselling on myself, a lot of working, realising that my behaviour had to change. I kind of minimised it a lot, kept saying, it's not that bad. I never really hit my wife or touched her, but certainly my behaviour was enough to have people walk on eggshells around me. And, with the journey of learning how to change and improving my relationship, one thing led to another, where I landed up eventually going back to school and studying, and then becoming a psychotherapist in counselling and human services, and then doing some fairly in-depth training around family violence, to the point that it got to where I thought, there's something missing out there for blokes. There's a lot of guys kind of struggle with, they don't believe they're such a bad guy, and most times they're not, but there's moments where they're confused and they do things that they regret, and when they put their hand out for help, they're kind of prejudged, and it kind of pushes people away. And so we started the program, I founded the organisation called the Heavy Metal Group.
Yeah. So Dave, one thing that I think is really important that we unpack straight away is understanding that aggression and violence isn't just about punching people and hurting people physically. And I think there's a lot of listeners out there who could probably relate to the fact that when young men are growing up and going through puberty, there can become this footy club mentality of get as many girls as you can and manipulate them and tell them what they want to hear to get them in bed, and then palm them off and start all over again. And this has been a cultural thing that I've been privy to. And if I was going to be completely honest, I played the games when I was in my early, sort of late teens, trying to get women to be hooked with this sort of manipulation. But when I worked with you, Dave, you helped me understand that that's a type of abuse in manipulation. So Can you tell the listeners a little bit about how abuse isn't just about punching people and hitting people?
Yeah, there's a huge myth out there, and both men and women kind of are a little bit kind of confused with this myth. A lot of women will say to me, "Oh, he's not violent," but when they're working through our program and we unpack all the different types of violence, they soon realise that they do live a life of what we call violence or abuse. Um, the fact is that the thing about violence is it's about inequality. And in a relationship, ideally, if we're going to make it work, it's about we don't have to own the other person. We don't have to be in charge of them. And we find that a lot of the underlying or the most common denominator underlying these issues is that insecurities and men wanting to have control over their partner. And so then all sorts of other things come to the surface, like jealousy, and then the needing to know who they're seeing and who they're talking to. And so types of violence for us is a whole range of things. And we talk about emotional abuse, power and control. We talk about financial abuse. We talk about social abuse. We talk about just intimidation. We also pull apart a type of violence where we condition our partner not to talk about certain topics so that we don't, as a male, we might not want to talk about what happened at the party last weekend or something that happened last Christmas, but our partner still has heard about it and she wants to talk to us, but we have a way about us that kind of teaches her to shut up. And if your partner or any partners are doing that, then we're kind of dancing that cycle of abuse. And I often refer to it as walking on eggshells. And I've worked with a lot of students at school from the age of 13, and they often say to me, "Dave, I love my dad, but I walk on eggshells around my father." And that means that the kid's living the cycle of violence. He's living that kind of being very mindful not to speak his mind or choose his words carefully so that dad doesn't explode.
So you just said explode then, Dave. And for people who aren't really sure about what explode is, it doesn't necessarily mean that you go and you bash somebody or you beat them around.
No.
Explode can be different things. There can be 2 or 3 sides to it. What sort of things can explode look like?
Well, the word explosion actually is the wrong word, and we use it often because we refer to it on the cycle. But really, when we look at it, the word explosion kind of has this kind of sense that I couldn't help it. My pressure cooker was filling up, and then bang, I've got a short fuse. It's my dad's got one, my brother's got one, and it kind of minimises what it really is. But the explosion can consist of a whole range of behaviours. But at the end of the day, if you spend some time working through it with us, you find that it comes back to making a choice. And so in the explosion or the choice to be abusive, you can be a passive kind of guy and then you can be an aggressive kind of guy. So at one end of the scale, if we look at aggression, and in psychology we talk about the fight and flight syndrome that us humans are very kind of conditioned to, and when we're under fear or when we're challenged, often reflect back to those responses. But if you looked at the aggression side, at the extreme case is where I physically touch someone. At the other end of the scale, there's the passive, the flight, and the extreme behaviour there is the silent treatment where we just don't talk. And so there's 2 extremities, but in between there's a whole range of behaviours that go on. So, we seem to, if we fall somewhere on that scale, then, it becomes a form of behaviour that isn't healthy. And we actually often refer to, if we're going to break this cycle and we're going to break away from a violent type of relationship, eventually we need to get back to good communication. And so aggressive behaviour and passive behaviour are the skills that we've been taught. And when we have to communicate, we fall back on that, and it's dysfunctional in today's times. So once we break the cycle, we often in our work will then start working towards good communication skills. And the sad thing is, Nate, a lot of us think that we're good communicators, but when we're under pressure or when we're hearing things that someone's saying and we don't like it, we tend to become poor communicators.
Mm. So, Dave, you said there about the other side of the spectrum in terms of people going quiet. Now, I'm sure a lot of people listening would say, "Oh, yeah, I can relate to that, and I can own that." That when I'm hearing things I want to hear, or people are edging on a subject that is sensitive to me, I'm just going to shut down. But what if someone listening was saying, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with that"? What are some of the damages that just going silent can do to a relationship, Dave?
Well, that's the myth. The myth is that I don't talk. But when I work with the woman or their partner, and that can be either, sometimes women will shut down, and then the guy will be talking to me in counselling saying, I can't, she doesn't talk to me. And then vice versa. So what happens then is it has an impact on the other person in the sense that we start thought stacking and we start wondering what's going on, and so our mind starts to race, and then that starts to self-doubt comes into it, and we can have thoughts like, oh, she doesn't love me, or she wants to leave me, or he's got somebody else, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm not good enough. So all these kind of messages start rolling through our mind, and so after a while it's like, well, how do you cope with that? And, for some of us, we can cope with it for a little while, and then other times we can't. And then we might explode in frustration. So we start demanding to talk. We start asking more questions. And if we still don't get the response, then we can, start to drive ourselves up through build-up, as we refer to. And then it can lead to another form of, losing it, or another form of explosion. The other thing, though, that we don't tend to realise is that, particularly us guys, if our partners shut down and withdraw, is that they do it for a reason, because after a while, we've taught them that if they say anything with an opinion, they're always wrong, or we then want to argue that opinion. And so, in a way, we set themselves up to withdraw, to shut up, to shut down. And, it's a very vicious cycle.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. And I think one of the reasons I got so much respect for you is that you're not somebody who just talks about theory. You can own the fact that you had behaviours that were toxic years ago, and it triggered you to want to make some changes. And I think there's probably a lot of people listening that say, "Oh, I don't have any issues with the way I behave because I don't hit anyone." But when we start thinking about going quiet, and we start thinking about the mind games we play, that sometimes we need to be a bit more accountable. And one of the things you do in your work, which I think is fantastic, is you get people to own things. And I think an issue we have in our industry, in personal development and health and understanding communication, is we read books, but we don't really own the information in the books. So why is it, Dave, that in your work, that you get people to change their language and to take ownership, and how does that affect things?
Well, nothing's going to change until you start becoming accountable. So to be accountable, you've got to step up and own it. We've been taught very well to blame and justify and make excuses for our behaviour. And often when a guy, he might have lost his cool and then he storms off, but when he settles down and starts thinking about it, then he might then in reflection come back and try again, and then start to own what he said was wrong. But if you listen very carefully, there'll always be the word "but," and the word "but" kind of minimises it and kind of lets us off the hook. And the only reason why we kind of do that is because we're driven by guilt and a shame. And the good guy inside all of us knows better. And then we kind of try to come up with a reason to get rid of that guilt off our shoulders, and sort of say, well, if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have, and if you hadn't said that, then, I wouldn't have done that. And at the end of the day, that's all crap. If you really want to get down to the nitty gritty about it, if you're wrong, you're wrong. Own it, and own exactly what you're wrong for, but also, put yourself in the other person's shoes. And we often talk about empathy, and a lot of us have got no idea what empathy is about. But empathy is connected with what's going on for her, what how must it be for her to listen to this or put up with my shit. And so it's about trying to own the effect of what my behavior was. So often in group we get guys starting to own it, and in an environment that's safe, if we can own it and recognize that it's wrong and recognize the impact it's had on you. So for example, it's not just the word sorry. I'm sorry for being such an ass last night. What are you actually sorry for? Well, I'm sorry for actually scaring you, and you must have walked away feeling like you're worthless, and that whatever you do is wrong. So that's owning it, and then from there we've now got a platform of moving forward. The reason why us guys don't like doing it is because it opens up Pandora's box. So if I own it, then she might then give me a serve back, and if she gives me a serve back, I've been conditioned to, if the ball gets hit my way, I've got to hit it back. But if we're going to grow with this, we don't hit the ball back. We've got to grab that ball and we've got to put it in our pocket, and we've got to start hearing what's being said. And this is now the springboard into good communication. Sounds really easy the way I'm talking like this, but it's not. When you're in that hot seat, as I call it, and you feel like you're being really challenged by your partner or put on the spot, that's where it feels extremely uncomfortable. Now, if it does feel uncomfortable, then what I say to these guys is great, because change is not comfortable. Anything we do in life, you want to go and do a workout at the gym, you want to pump more weight, you want to run those extra kilometres, your mind's telling you, no, not today, let's put it off, or we try to find reason not to get out of that hot seat. Well, this is no different. If we're going to get good at this, if we're going to beat this cycle, we want to start getting closer to our partner, getting on the same level with each other, we need to work through the hard yards.
Yeah. Dave, one of your big influences has been the work of Steve Biddulph, and Steve comes from Tasmania. He's done some fantastic work. A lot of the parents who are listening to this discussion between us may have read the book Raising Boys and understanding how to create a positive environment to help your sons thrive. He's also got a book, Manhood, as well. And one thing that he talks about in his book is initiation, and how we go from being a young boy going through our teenage years, through puberty, but there's no initiation process, and there isn't that male mentor or guide that can be there to tell them what it's about to be a man and to do the right thing. And one of the issues we face, particularly at sporting clubs and associations, is we get a mix of all these different ages, and sometimes we get the wrong impression coming through from the top down, so then the cycle continues. So can you shed a little bit of light on that as well, Dave?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I talk about the good guy and the bad guy inside us, and the good guy's intention is not all about that, but unfortunately we're all products of our environment, and most of our role models have been holding on to this old school of thought. And the old school of thought is about, real men don't cry, you got to toughen it up, suck it up, princess, and that kind of idea doesn't teach men how to express or get connected with their feelings. And if we can't get connected with our own feelings, then how do we get connected with showing empathy to others? We sort of kind of dismiss it, and there's a sort of no care factor. Unfortunately, for a lot of our young guys, these messages are also so widespread in their lives, like not just in sporting and not just in footy clubs or sporting clubs that they mix with older people. It's in their music, it's on the internet, it's in the videos, it's in the films. It's the words of songs are kind of, there's messages about women are at a certain level and men are at another level. And until we break that thinking and break that culture, it's just going to continue on.
Yeah.
So us mothers, we don't realise how much power we have. And Biddulph's book is a brilliant book, and he's just revised it, the new Manhood. And I encourage every bloke that comes through my doors to read it. And I've not had one bloke that comes back and says, oh, that book was a load of shit or waste of time. Steve's got a really good way of putting it out there, the struggle that we have as men, and how we've kind of carried on from our father. And that's one of the things that, in my reflection and in my journey that I've struggled with, is that I never really liked the way my father did certain things, particularly being, reference to my mother and in reference to some of the things as a father. And I always said that when I became a father or I became a husband, I would be different. But as time goes on, or as I should say, as time went on, I actually started to see that when I was under pressure or stressed out or not getting my own way, I started to become my father, and I could hear my voice. I could see it in my actions. And, it's amazing, Nathan, in this journey so far, working with men and in trying to empower men to look at change, how many other guys will say that when they first meet me? They'll say, Dave, I've started to become like my father, and I despise that. As much as I love him and as much as I have a lot of respect for him, there's certain parts of how he raised me that I would never do to my own children, and yet I've caught myself, I'm becoming more and more like that. And so, we can break this if we can start looking at how we raise our boys and how we start changing the culture, how we talk about women and how we refer to women. I work with 13-year-old boys at schools, and they're often on their internet phone, and if they see me walking around the school from one end of the school to the other, and I'm checking my messages or my emails, there's an in-house joke. Oh, get off your phone, Dave. What are you? You're on the porn again, or something like that. There's some connection with phone and pornography, and I'm completely against all of that. But the boys tend to just make that idea that it's an assumption, and yet when you get talking to them, get to know them, they're often got pictures of girls, and they're talking about those pictures, and that on its own is bringing home the idea that where are women in all this? And I often challenge them and go, would you be saying that if that was your sister? If that was your sister, what would you be saying? Or if that guy was looking at that picture and it was your sister, what would you be saying? And then they get angry. They'd say, oh, no, I'd have a go at him. So there's this, it's not, the equality is just not there, and there's a hypocrisy through it all as well. Which, leading to that, means, some of the other problems that I find in schools is that the boys are starting to say to girls, if you want to go out with me, you've got to send me some photos. And this last year was a bit of a problem at a couple of the schools that I worked at. And they're asking these girls, and I can't believe the girls are actually, they go along with it. And they're asking them, the boys are asking them, send me some photos of you with no clothes on, certain positions, and then I'll consider whether you're worthy of taking out. And these girls, I can't get my head around it. They do it. And, as a school and as, responsible people, we follow that up and, we put a stop to it. But, these girls still don't have the self-belief and self-worth in themselves to go, hey, I don't need this. I'm better than that. It's sad.
It's really sad. And it always hits me in the chest, Dave, because I've got a 7-year-old daughter, and thinking she's about to go through the teenage years where that's the culture is extremely alarming. Now, another point I want to make is there's a lot of coaches and trainers who listen to this podcast and always write in and give feedback. And I think one thing I want to make really clear is, as a coach, we're not just looking at trying to improve athletic performance and get better physical results out of the people we work with, but particularly if we're working with young sport teams, we have the opportunity to really change the way that the culture is with those guys, and to be a good role model and lead by example and pull them up. If you see them on the phone just saying, come on guys, that's not on, then there's no need for it, to start to change the way we look at those sorts of things.
And also change the language. Change the language in the changing rooms. Change the language when you're having a beer. Change the language in the attitude towards, if a girl goes past, and then, the comments that might be made, or, we tend to, as a pack mentality, just kind of collude with it. The idea of breaking the culture is to go, hey, that's not on, cut it out. It's we don't need to speak like that, and being really mindful of it. Even the football grounds where parents are yelling and screaming abuse from the sidelines. That on its own is a culture that can be broken. That culture, has an effect on young people saying, well, that's okay, that's that's what you do, is it?
Mm.
That commercial on TV I think is really empowering. The one where, there's a little kid sitting in the back seat and he sees his mum or his father doing a little bit of road rage, and next minute, the child's, almost replaying and acting out like the parent. That's how powerful we are. And so we can break that by showing them a different way of responding.
Yeah, yeah. Another key point that I really want to bring up is earlier when we were talking about the explosion and how people withdraw and go quiet, often we don't have the communication skills to express ourselves properly because we've never been taught. And we lead into these games of tennis, like you say, Dave, where you're hitting a ball back and forward in an argument, but you don't get anywhere. It's like the topic becomes taboo, and it's just a vicious cycle. And one of the real alarming things is we need to talk about it because there's such a huge issue at the moment. You might be able to get the quote more specific than I can, Dave, but I think between the age of 16 and 45, the biggest killer is suicide amongst men. I don't know if that's the exact age group, but the fact is that this is a problem that doesn't get discussed. And if we can actually start approaching communication and creating better relationships, hopefully we can start changing the result that it has on our society with all these men taking their lives because they don't have anyone they can talk to. Because like you said, what are you wussing about? What are you sooking about? Just toughen up and get on with it. Whereas if we can actually start shifting away from that, we could have some major changes.
Yeah, well, when we get back to fundamentals, as we started talking about earlier, if we kind of dance this cycle that we refer to, we're not just dancing it ourselves, we're taking the people around us with us. And so our partners and our children dance the clock with us. And like a lot of the boys that I work with in schools, a lot of them don't want to talk to their parents because just like I said before, if they talk to them, then they get a lecture or the parent takes it the wrong way and they feel like the teenager is hitting the ball at them. And so, the parents then start to play the game with the teenagers rather than just trying to understand and try to get a really good sense of what the other person's perspective is. What do they really think? What do they really feel? I often say to couples, when I'm working with the guys, I'll go, well, when you walk away from that discussion, can you actually confirm what she thinks and what she feels? And a lot of them will say to me, no, I don't, because a lot of it's based on assumption. How many of us have had an argument with our partner and then a couple of days later, we haven't spoken and we finally get to make up and we start talking about it. And then when we look back over it and we were getting angry and shitty about something, but that's not what we were talking about. It kind of gets mixed up in all the, he said, she said. And this is the same thing that's happening with teenagers. Eventually, like I said before, we teach the other person not to talk to us. So we teach our partners to shut down, hold it in. We teach our young boys, our young daughters to do the same thing. So they go looking for someone else to talk to that's going to hear them. And usually they look, for any of their friends or their peers. And sometimes those friends and peers aren't the people you want them to be listening to or talking to. But for them, they hear them and they're not judged. They hear them and they can show empathy, they can show understanding. And so we actually push them away and push them into the hands of sometimes bad influenced people. But the suicide rate just here in the city of Casey is the highest in Victoria for teenagers. And of teenagers that are committing suicide. And, across this country of ours, it's something like 7 guys a day are doing themselves, killing themselves. And women are around that 3 per day, 4 per day. So, it's a really sad, and it's also a problem that we could all take part in. We could all kind of look at ourselves and look at what are we doing? What can we do different? How do we talk to our family? How do we talk to our children? Can you say to yourself, when my kid really wants to, talk to me, I actually understand what he's saying, what he's feeling, or am I just I hear him and then I'm giving him a lecture and telling him not to think like that? Because if we are, it's just another way of saying, you're wrong, you should be thinking this.
Mm. Dave, I think it was Tuesday this week. There was a whole segment on what you're talking about, the city of Casey, in regards to there was a liquor store that's going to open up, but the community was saying, hang on, we can't do it. We can't have another liquor store open because of the issues with domestic violence. And as you said, city of Casey is right in the thick of it with one of the highest rates of reported abuse. So what are your thoughts on alcohol and how it affects everything we're talking about? Because just to let the listeners know as well, when I've worked with Dave in the past, there's a strict rule that if you're coming along to be part of the Better Relationships program, that you can't have a few beers first. So why is that, Dave? And what effect does alcohol have on this conversation?
One of the obvious reasons is because if you're going to get a group of men together and you're all meant to be angry, and you're coming to work on your anger issues or work on, changing your behaviour, the last thing you want is somebody that's had a few under their belt, because it's part of wearing that mask. And if the subject gets a bit sensitive, then you might react more than you would if you hadn't had it or you weren't under the influence. But in our work, we've got to be a little bit careful, because sometimes us guys are really good at looking for reasons why our behaviour is bad. Remember I said before that when we say sorry, we might say sorry, but then we finish with a but. And then once we open up with a but, here comes the excuse and the justification. And, often in my work over the years, I'll have guys say to me, look, if I didn't drink, none of this would happen. But as we spend more time together and they might have got off the grog and they're not drinking, sure enough, with time, you hear that clock go tick, 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 and then bang, there's something else that's just happened. And I will often say, well, you were sober that day, you weren't drinking that day. And then they realise that the issues are a lot deeper than that. But when, we talk about shifting culture, and one of the things that, is a thing in our culture is alcohol. And, in some trades, it's almost like part of being a real man, come 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, it's, take the tops off the stubbies. It's almost a tradition to have a stubby or a traveller in the car. And it, we kind of live a life like that, where we go from a mate's place to the next mate's place, and it's automatically, let's have a drink. The thing is, though, that that has a negative impact on everyone that's close to you and that's around you that doesn't drink and who hasn't had a drink. And I often refer to alcohol as pouring petrol on the fire. So the fire's always simmering away there, and then we have a bit of alcohol, and then boom, it's a lot easier for it to become more of a torch, more of a burner, and so it's not a good mix. Like everything, it's about finding a balance. But we have a lot of cases where there's a lot of violence episodes, and the police do a lot of call-outs, and there's always someone. Well, it's very common for someone to be intoxicated to the point that you can see that their behaviour's not their normal self. Like I said, it's a fine line about making that an excuse. I believe that it's still around choice, and alcohol doesn't help. Not a big one.
Yeah, like in our communities, I think I'm not sure if it's Sydney or there's another, maybe Adelaide. I can't remember exactly, guys, so don't quote me on this one. But there's been some lockouts. So after 2 a.m, the pubs close or people can't get in, because what they were finding was the rates of violence spike when the beers have really been flowing later in the evening. That's when all the aggression takes place. Yeah. So do you think that that's been a good step, Dave? And what would you like to see happen that would help help us change the way we're moving with alcohol at the moment?
Yeah, look, when we talk about that type of violence, though, we're talking about the extremities of violence, of physical violence, which gets away from some of the stuff we were talking about before. And I think the alcohol on the streets and even the drug issues on the streets is definitely something that as a community we should be looking at and finding ways of maybe reducing that, because it gets to a point where, some of these people are just, there was a young boy just up in Eltham on the weekend that was hit outside a pub, and unfortunately, he's passed. They just turned the life support system off, and it seems so unnecessary. And so, it might be worth trialing these things and turning off the taps, turning off the alcohol, making it not so easily available. But there's always that argument that, why do others who are responsible have to suffer for it? But, I think it's, with unnecessary deaths due to it, it's just, it has to stop. It really has to stop.
I think the next thing for us to cover, Dave, is you had a documentary that was on the ABC earlier this year, or it might have even been late last year. I'll have to check the exact date that it was filmed, but it was called Call Me Dad. And since that came out, there's been a lot of interest from sporting associations, some of the guys at the AFL clubs and community groups it's really hit people right between the eyes and also in the chest, in terms of the message that you got across in your work. So for those people who haven't seen Call Me Dad, can you tell the listeners a little bit about that and what was the driver behind getting that information out and about into the communities?
Yeah, well, we volunteered to do that film to try to break down some of the myths and barriers connected with men putting their hand up to get help and work on changing their behaviour. For those things that we talked about before, that guys often say, but I'm not an abusive, I'm not an aggressive man, I never hit my wife. The film, we had a lot of discussions with the filmmakers before we volunteered to do it. It was actually shown last year on White Ribbon Day, or around the week of White Ribbon Day on the ABC. The ABC did have it on there on the internet for a short time, but I believe they've taken it down. They created two versions of it. There's the 55-minute documentary, and then there's an hour and a half or 90-minute film version. And we believe the film version's much better. It shows a lot more work of our classwork in there. And basically the film goes into the lives of men that are participants in our program. So you see the men when they first start at the very beginning, and the film follows them for about 3 months, in and out of the film and in and out of the classwork, I should say, and into their private lives. And you see the struggles, you see the ups and downs. But one thing that I think the film crew did, and the producer and the director, Sophie Weisner, did, she very creative lady. She was able to capture those moments when the light bulbs turn on inside, as I call it. The moving moments when the guys got it. They got the penny dropped, how they had to kind of let go of power and control and kind of sit more with vulnerability and then see the positive impacts that sort of had on their families. So yeah, the film's created a lot of discussion, and that's why my colleague Jackie Seamark and myself did it for that reason. And yeah, we're really quite feel quite proud to be part of something that was good, I believe, really good for the community. Get the blinkers off, get people talking, get people thinking, looking at themselves. And I guess the other thing that we've tried to do in there's a mix of men in there. So there's a mix of personalities, and often I've had phone calls all over Australia from guys saying, I saw the film, and that guy in that film, and they'll describe the character, he's me, and my wife thinks that's me too, and I really need your help. Can you help me with working on change? We at Heavy Metal, the participants actually of the group this term that are actually participating in the program this term have got together, and they want to organise a fundraiser at a cinema. So we're in the process of setting up a date and getting the community. We'll publicise it as we get closer and find what the date is. But we're actually going to show the film, and Jackie, my colleague, and I will be at the end of the film for Q&A for people who ask us questions, and we'll answer some of their questions about whatever they'd like to discuss in reference to our work and in reference to what the film's about. And but we want to go for a record. We want to the guys in the participants in our program at the moment want to get a cinema, and we want to sell the cinema out, and the money that we raise from the selling of the seats, we want to give to a very good cause. We want to kind of raise money as a fundraiser, and so we're hoping to do that. I would imagine in the next 2 to 3 months. The guys at the moment are searching for a cinema and searching for a location, and if you haven't seen it, it will be a really great opportunity to come along and jump on board and view it.
Yeah. So just to let everybody know as well, my involvement with heavy metal at the moment, I've got a lot of experience in education. A lot of the people listening who know me personally know I've worked heavily in the health space, in rehabilitation, and also in training up presenters and facilitators to be able to teach groups at the highest standard to change the level of professionalism in our fitness industry. But because this work that heavy metal does is so important, I've actually been volunteering my time to help raise the awareness as to what heavy metal does, and have the objective of sourcing out some of the top level coaches to go through the program that Dave teaches, and then be able to coach others in the systems of heavy metal. So we've been working, like the momentum from Jimmy Bartell in the paper has raised a lot of awareness. I've had in-depth conversations with a lot of different people at different sports. Terry Condon, who was at the event, the coach down at Geelong, he is very keen for us to get involved with the Geelong Footy Club and into community groups. So if what we're talking about, the conversation Dave and I are having right now, hits a bit of a nerve with you or gets you thinking about your behaviour, or maybe you've got kids and you're thinking, gosh, if this is the way the industry's moving or our culture's moving, and you want to actually do something about it, you can reach out to myself. You can send me an email or send a reply to this episode, and we can have further discussions about getting you involved. But of course, it's not for everyone. We want people who have the integrity and don't fall into the trap of turning it into a boys' club. And so we've got some very clear systems and processes that we're putting in place at the moment to be able to grow this Australia-wide as our first step in the next sort of 12 to 18 months, and then take it even further. Because I'm sure on social media, many of you have seen some of the violence that's happening from a physical sense, but having listened to Dave today, maybe you've got a better perspective on different types of abuse, with sexual abuse and expectations of females, or how we can go silent and put people down. So if this is something that's hit home with you and you want to be involved, you can send me an email, nathan.bodybrain@gmail.com, or you can go to the Facebook page, the Heavy Metal Group. Have a Facebook page. You just type in Heavy Metal Group, and we've just got that going. There's going to be a lot of information up there with statistics, bits of information about what we've been speaking about today. And also, if you want to keep in the know regarding the upcoming event that we'll be having at the cinemas too, that will also be there as well. So Dave, I've been waffling for a few minutes there, but is there anything you'd like to add in terms of where you'd like to see what we're trying to achieve go long term, or add to what I've been saying?
Yeah, look, I like to be able to hope that as a community we can work together, and it's discussions like this, and work towards making a change and saying no to violence, but not just the violence that we all assume is physical violence, but no to family violence right across the board. And I think there's a lot of positive male role models out there that can jump on board and help us work this. So,
yeah. With some of the listeners as well, like what we're doing, we've put together, there's manuals that we've put together, there's slideshows and PowerPoints, and we're going to have training days for future facilitators. So if this is something you'd want to be involved in, but you're not necessarily somebody who wants to be a facilitator potentially, there's always room to build our team and get you further involved. You'll often hear me talk about legacy and having a personal legacy. And what that's all about is doing something that makes the world a bit of a better place, or having a positive influence on generations to come. And sometimes when we think about physical conditioning and coaching, yes, we might improve somebody's athletic performance for a period of time. But if we can actually change culture and have what Steve Biddulph would call a bit of a men's movement to change the way our society is going, I think that's really powerful. And I'll own the fact that I've made mistakes early in my life as well in terms of the way I was treating people, and I can speak firsthand as to how powerful this work is. So, Dave, if people want to reach out to you or potentially go through the programs, we're currently building the online site as well for people who are interstate. But can you tell the guys about where you're based and potentially how they could go through the program as a participant, first of all?
Well, first of all, we're based in Narre Warren. Our program's often running through the school terms. There's 4 terms throughout the year. But before anyone can look at getting involved in the program, they need to really come and see me and have a chat with me and have a talk about, looking at, where they possibly would like to look at themselves. And I think, it's all very well to jump on a bandwagon and go, yeah, I want to, make changes in our community. But I think the most powerful facilitators, or the most influenced facilitators, are the ones that have actually experienced it and can own that there's parts of their life that they've got to improve and change. And that's where the program will give those, some skills and tools to look at yourselves. And then it's about taking it to the next level. But our website, it's going through an upgrade now, but it's available, it's online, and there'll be constant information on the website. All you have to do is type the words Heavy Metal Group Anger Management, and you should find us. Or, like you said, Nate, before, on Facebook, type the words Heavy Metal Group, and our Facebook will come up. And our email addresses and contact numbers are all there if anyone wants to, touch base with me. We're based at Narre Warren in Victoria. We work in a couple of different schools in the area, and that's another thing. There might be people out there that are involved in schools where some of this work should be looking at influencing young boys. And from my experience so far, working with them at a younger age, we've found that starting at year 7 is we have a much bigger influence on them at that age than starting at year 10 or year 11. Year 10, year 11, they've already got their minds made up, and it's usually we have to wait for them to fall flat on their face before they put their hand up for help. But at year 7 level, we've had a lot of success in changing kids in the sense of their attitude towards wanting to better their life, do better at school, actually turn up at school rather than be down at the skate park or to stay lying in bed for work till midday. So it's finding ways that we can connect into those places as well. And the listeners out there might have a suggestion, and we're open to different suggestions, open to chatting. And
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think today's objective was not only to help all the listeners understand how they can improve their relationships, both on a personal level and also in regards to understanding athletes. But the other side of it, which I think is so important, is understanding about what sort of role model you are being in terms of changing the culture around the generations coming through, particularly with, I know a lot of parents, there would have been a few things in this episode that have hit home with you regarding the stuff that's going on with girls as young as 12 these days, and sending pictures of themselves naked is extremely scary. So, guys, I hope you got a lot out of this. Just to follow up again, if you want to find out more, you can email me personally, nathan.bodybrain@gmail.com. And I advise you to get on and follow the Heavy Metal Group on both Facebook, and you can check them out on the internet as well. So, Dave, thank you so much for your time today. I think you're one of the best in the business of what you do, and that's why I work with you, and I've got so much respect for you. And I hope this, what we're trying to do, where you can build more momentum and get some big influential players on board with us to help make this change possible.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. It's been a pleasure. Anytime.
No problem. All right, guys, that's it for today, and we'll see you next time.